After years of watching my dad enable his wife, my stepmom, and her entitled, toxic behavior, I finally decided to cut ties. The breaking point came when she attacked my kid during an argument over a wedding-related issue. I tried sharing this story on AITA a few days ago using a different account, but the post didn't make it through, probably because of the sensitive content. Since then, my wife and I have reassured ourselves that we made the right decision. So, this will be my final attempt to share what happened. I've added some extra details and changed the wording a bit for clarity. All names in this story are fake. I'm 28M, and my stepmother, 49F, fancies herself a party planner extraordinaire. Ever since marrying my dad, she's appointed herself the unofficial host for every single family event or holiday on his side. As a kid, I never enjoyed these gatherings. She's the kind of person who micromanages everything and gets furious if someone dares to complain. But for my dad's sake, I tolerated her behavior. He always said it helped her feel included. Now, I'm planning a wedding with my fiancée, Jane, 26F. We got engaged in early 2021, but life took a detour when Jane became pregnant a few months later. We decided to postpone the wedding to focus on raising our son, which meant we've had a pretty lengthy engagement. From the start, my stepmom has tried to take control of our wedding plans. She's interfered in every way you can imagine, complaining, contacting our wedding planner behind our backs, even showing up uninvited to Jane's dress fittings. We've repeatedly told her to stop, but she just won't listen. My dad, of course, wants us to humor her, but it's obvious she's bitter about not being in charge of the wedding or being labeled mother of the groom on the invitations. Aside from our baby boy, Jane and I also care for Luke, her 4-year-old paternal half-brother. She got custody of him shortly after we started dating, following the tragic loss of his parents. During the pandemic, I moved in with Jane and Luke, and I've been in his life ever since he was a baby. Luke doesn't call me Dad, he sees us as his sister and his OP, but we love him like he's our own son. My stepmother, however, despises Luke. She accuses Jane of baby-trapping her way into the family, and her bitterness only grew worse after our son was born. While my dad gets along well with Jane and absolutely adores both kids, my stepmother has made it clear she wants nothing to do with Luke. She's even demanded that my dad refuse to babysit him, which is why we rarely leave the kids with them. Instead, Jane's brother and his spouse usually watch them since their kids are close in age to ours. Last Sunday, however, we had an event to attend, and Jane's brother was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as do my mom and sister, so my dad agreed to babysit at our place. When we got home, we found both kids crying, my stepmother screaming, and my dad making a feeble attempt to calm everyone down. What set her off? Luke had innocently mentioned that he and our son would both be our ring bearers, and she lost it. She started yelling that she wouldn't allow it because, in her words, he's not family. Things escalated horribly when Luke began crying. She even hit him hard enough to split his lip. That was the moment we drew the line. We immediately banned her from our house and our wedding. Now my dad is furious and says he won't come to the wedding without her. He's even managed to convince a good portion of his side of the family to boycott as well, downplaying what happened to make it seem less severe. This includes my stepbrother, who always sides with his mother no matter what. Despite explaining the situation multiple times, he refuses to believe us. Jane and I are standing firm on this, though. Some of my cousins, who've decided not to attend the wedding anymore, are asking us to reconsider. On the other hand, most of Jane's family fully supports us, though one of her aunts suggested that my stepmother might be acting out because she feels excluded from my family. Honestly, I'm done with people excusing her behavior. My dad has been enabling her for years, and it's only gotten worse. I do love him, and I wish he could be at my wedding, but I'm not willing to compromise my family's safety and well-being just to appease him or her. Quick note, I think I accidentally deleted this part earlier, but we did press charges. We took Luke to the pediatrician the next day to document everything. We gathered every single piece of evidence we could find. Not only did we take photos of Luke's injuries, but by some unbelievable stroke of luck, our nanny cam also captured key moments. While the physical attack itself happened off camera, there's clear footage of my stepmom screaming and Luke crying both before and after the incident. Some commenters correctly guessed that my stepmom hadn't exactly been invited to our house. The truth is, my dad hasn't gone anywhere without her in years, so we made sure to take precautions. We never imagined she'd go so far as to hurt anyone physically, but we also never trusted her around the kids. Now, she's facing a child abuse charge that's officially on her record. There was no way we were going to let her get away with this. Quick note, there's so much more I want to add, and I'll try to address as many comments as possible. I didn't expect this level of response, so for now, let me just say that Luke is okay. We took him to the pediatrician the day after the incident. He was already seeing a counselor because Jane, having gone through the trauma of losing her own dad and stepmom, wanted to make sure her pain didn't indirectly affect him. We've continued his treatment, and he's been getting a bit of extra love and attention from us lately. He's still a little shaken up but is already starting to feel much better. Update, entitled Stepmonster officially banned from our wedding. First, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read or comment on my previous post. This past week has been incredibly tough, but it's comforting to know that people care. I haven't been able to reply to every comment yet, but I'll address a few things in this update. Fair warning, this might be a bit long. Jane and I have decided to go completely no contact with my dad and stepmom. We haven't spoken to either of them since the incident, and I don't plan to reach out anytime soon. For now, any communication is being handled through my younger sister, who is firmly on our side. She and I have agreed to keep things at low contact for the time being. Jane has a philosophy about dealing with people she cares about, and I've decided to adopt it: forgive what's genuinely apologized for, but never forget. If my dad and stepmom ever come to truly understand the harm they've caused and offer a sincere apology, we might be able to forgive them, begrudgingly. However, we will never pretend this didn't happen or allow them to forget the damage they did to our family. For the foreseeable future, neither of them will be allowed anywhere near Luke, our baby, or any other children we might have. As for the rest of my family, I saw quite a few comments suggesting that I post photos of Luke's injuries or share the nanny cam footage online. I'm not very active on social media, but even if I were, I wouldn't feel comfortable exposing my injured preschooler like that. The internet is forever, and I don't want those images to follow him through life. I've also chosen not to share the photos with extended family unless it becomes absolutely necessary. Most of my family loves my dad but has always been lukewarm about my stepmom. She was married twice before meeting my dad. Her first marriage, which produced my stepbrother, ended when she cheated on her then-boyfriend to be with my dad. My family adored the woman she left behind and disliked my stepmom from the start. Over the years, she's shown herself to be controlling and manipulative. She's always tried to position herself as the family matriarch, usually by taking over planning duties for every family event, parties, holidays, you name it. As a kid, I hated these gatherings because she had a way of making everything about herself, even Christmas or birthdays that were supposed to be for me and my sister. Most of the family tolerated her but didn't like her. With Luke, it was different. Most of my relatives didn't meet him until he was 2 because of COVID restrictions, but they adored him right away. He's a bright, sweet little boy, and since there weren't many other young kids in the family, everyone naturally doted on him. I think my stepmom resented how easily Jane and Luke were embraced by the family when she had faced such resistance early on. That's probably part of why she harbors so much bitterness toward them, though I can't say for sure. She was also furious about her lack of involvement in our wedding. Beyond not being allowed to plan anything, she wasn't given any role in the wedding party. She tried to pressure us into letting her officiate, but we'd already asked one of Jane's best friends to do that over a year ago. She wasn't happy that I chose my best friend as my best man instead of my stepbrother. And when we offered the role of flower girl to Jane's 3-year-old niece, who we're very close to, stepmom tried to argue that her own niece, a 15-year-old who doesn't even know us, should have been chosen instead. She even went so far as to suggest that my dad walk Jane down the aisle since her father has passed, but Jane's eldest brother was already set to do that. Stepmom made it clear she was disappointed that my family wasn't as involved in the wedding as Jane's and kept making snide remarks about how such a thing would never happen if she were in charge. Let me start by saying this: there's absolutely no justification for being so cruel to a child. If my suspicion is correct and my stepmom's behavior stems from petty jealousy, that only makes it worse. Since I'm not speaking to my father, my sister has been keeping me in the loop about what's going on with him. Apparently, the story my dad and stepmom have been spreading to the family completely erases Luke's injury and the abuse charges. Instead, they're framing it as though Jane and I banned them because we were annoyed with my stepmom and decided to punish my dad in the process. Thankfully, most of the relatives I genuinely care about were already aware of my stepmom's nature, so explaining what really happened that night wasn't difficult. Once they heard the truth, many of them apologized and even started calling out my dad for enabling her. On the other hand, the people who didn't believe us, or insisted we were overreacting, have been told they're no longer welcome in our lives. Unsurprisingly, most of those are from my dad's generation. Realizing that they're so biased they'd defend a woman they openly dislike, just to make my dad happy, has been a weirdly reassuring moment for me. I don't need people like that in my life. As for my stepbrother, he's still in complete denial. Despite all the evidence we've shown, he refuses to believe his mom could hurt a child. I get it, to some extent. I love my mom too, but that doesn't mean I'd blindly excuse this kind of behavior. Because of his unwillingness to face the truth, he's been cut off as well. It's hard, especially since we were close growing up, but I don't regret the decision. Luckily, Jane's family has been a bright spot in all of this. She has 3 siblings besides Luke, her eldest brother, the one I mentioned earlier, a twin brother, and a younger sister, and I'm closer to them now than I ever was to my stepbrother. Her family has been furious over what happened and incredibly supportive of us. When Jane got custody of Luke, her maternal relatives practically adopted him into their lives, and they've been checking in regularly to make sure he's okay. One unexpected silver lining is that we've saved some money thanks to everyone we uninvited from the wedding. We decided to use those funds to help Jane's cousin, who lives abroad and couldn't afford to come to the wedding. We're paying for her plane ticket, and it feels good to turn something negative into something positive. As for Luke, he's doing much better. His split lip, thankfully, was a shallow injury. It's healing well and didn't need stitches. A few days ago, we sat him down to explain that my dad and stepmom wouldn't be around anymore. Luke really liked my dad, but even at his young age, he understands that my dad and stepmom are a package deal. He's clearly afraid of her, but we've been doing everything we can to make him feel safe. Jane and I have reassured him again and again that he is absolutely part of our family and that nothing will ever change that. I'm not too worried about my dad or stepmom trying to crash the wedding, but we've alerted the venue staff and given them pictures just in case. Better safe than sorry, right? A lot of people pointed out the hypocrisy of my stepmom claiming that Luke isn't family, and I couldn't agree more. The irony of it all is that her constant excuse for her behavior is that she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. My dad has spent years guilting me into indulging her for that very reason. But now, seeing him make excuses for her while ignoring the fact that Luke actually is family, has helped me realize something important. While I'll always love my dad, it's neither safe nor healthy for me and my family to have him in our lives right now. It hurts to think that my son won't have his only biological grandfather in his life, but thankfully, he has 2 wonderful step-grandpas who love him like their own. For now, I'm at peace with how things have turned out. Sure, life is messy, but it's a beautiful mess. I love my fiancé, I adore my kids, and I'm fortunate enough to have a job I truly enjoy. We're happy, and I refuse to let anyone take that away from us. To those who were annoyed with the way I censored my original post, when my AITA attempt didn't work out, Jane suggested toning down the explicit details. Since I'm still new to Reddit, I might have gone overboard. Hopefully, this version strikes a better balance. I'm hoping this will be my final update, but I'll keep you posted if anything major happens. Again, thank you for all your kindness and support. Best wishes to all of you. Update, Stepmonster, family drama, and next steps. I'll start with something that might disappoint some of you. It's becoming increasingly clear that my stepmom won't face serious legal consequences. Realistically, she'll probably get nothing more than a slap on the wrist. Jane and I have been discussing our next steps with our lawyer, but it's too early to make any concrete decisions. For now, our focus is on starting the process of securing a restraining order against her. We're using all the evidence we gathered, including the nanny cam footage and photos of Luke's injuries. That's our immediate priority. I still haven't spoken to my father, but my sister continues to keep me updated. My sister is still in low contact with my dad, but she's seriously considering cutting ties completely. Right now, she's the only one on my side who still speaks to him. He keeps pestering her for updates about me, asking if I've calmed down yet. According to her, he's frustrated that so much of the family refuses to speak to him, yet he still doesn't seem to fully understand why. I told my sister she doesn't have to keep acting as a go-between for me and our father. I never asked her to do that, and it's clearly taking an emotional toll on her. She insists she'll stop when she feels ready, but I'm trying to make it clear that I don't expect it from her. There's absolutely no question that my stepmom attacked Luke. When we got home, Luke told us what had happened right away, and my dad even confirmed it himself, though it was part of a weak attempt to defend her. He didn't try to hide it from us, which, frankly, is the only remotely positive thing I can say about how he handled the situation. At least he gave Luke an ice pack. Meanwhile, my stepmom was too busy shouting about how Luke was a whining brat to even deny it. For those who guessed my stepmom is younger than my dad, you'd win an invisible cookie. She's also 5 years younger than his previous girlfriend. They got together when I was about 15, and my stepbrother, who's only a month older than me, was born when she was 21. She turns 50 this year, if that puts things into perspective. Both our kids are mostly okay now. Luke's back to running around the house in his Superman costume whenever he doesn't have something else to occupy him. He had a few nightmares this past week and asked to sleep in our bed twice, but we're making sure he feels safe and supported. We don't bring up my father around him, and he's still seeing his counselor regularly. Our 14-month-old son is also doing great. He's learned 2 new words, hi and bye, and Luke has taken it upon himself to try to teach him to say his name. Later this month, Jane's younger sister is coming to visit for a few days to celebrate her 21st birthday. Luke is thrilled to see her, and Jane's looking forward to having some fun and letting loose. Honestly, I can't blame her, she deserves it. We're all hoping her presence will help lift everyone's spirits. Jane and I are both struggling emotionally. She's usually the kind of person who keeps her feelings bottled up, but she cried herself to sleep almost every night during the week it all happened. Watching her go through that has been heartbreaking, and I can't shake the guilt. There's a part of me that keeps saying I couldn't have known my stepmom would do something like this, but that doesn't change the fact that I allowed my father around my kids unsupervised, knowing she'd probably tag along. It's the guiltiest I've ever felt, and I'm not sure I'll ever truly forgive myself. Jane has been doing better lately and is encouraging me to see a therapist. I've never done that before, aside from seeing a psychiatrist briefly when I was younger, but now feels like the right time to give it a try. This week, I was surprised to receive a few messages from people urging me to forgive my dad and stepmom and re-invite them to the wedding. That's not happening. I'm not willing to forgive my stepmom, ever. My dad's forgiveness is a distant, maybe, but I'll never forget or fully understand how he could enable what she did. As for the wedding itself, it's still going ahead as planned. We considered rescheduling, but the date we picked is the only one that works for most of our guests. We've made sure all of our vendors have passwords and clear instructions to only deal with us directly. Jane's family, being bigger and closer-knit, is more involved in the wedding than mine, but I do have family participating. My sister is one of Jane's bridesmaids, 2 of my cousins are groomsmen, and my mom will be walking with the wedding party. Going through all of this with Jane has made me realize, more than ever, just how much I love her. I couldn't ask for a better partner to build a life with, and I honestly have no idea what I'd do without her. This ordeal didn't tear us apart, it brought us closer, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. I wasn't planning to post another update before the wedding, but something significant happened recently. Update: court hearing drama. The good news is, we got the restraining order. The bad news? Jane and I had to see both my dad and stepmom at the court hearing. This was the first time we'd seen them since kicking them out of our house over a month ago, and neither of us was looking forward to it. We left the kids with Jane's brother and sister-in-law, so at least Luke didn't have to see them. The hearing itself went faster than I expected. To my dad's credit, he seemed to realize they had no chance of winning this. Between the nanny cam footage, Luke's medical records, and the photos we'd taken, the evidence against them was overwhelming. My sister had even gathered additional evidence that my sister had collected a treasure trove of evidence for the court hearing. This included texts and emails that my stepmom sent to her and other family members about the incident, along with recordings of stepmom talking on the phone. Apparently, she loves to vent over calls, so there were plenty of incriminating recordings. Despite all this evidence against her, my stepmom and my father didn't even bother hiring an attorney. The judge granted us a protection order against her, meaning she can't come within 500 feet of us or our property. We're changing all the locks this week, and I'm seriously considering changing my phone number as well. The moment we walked out of that courthouse was the first time I'd felt truly safe since this nightmare began. Jane was on the verge of happy tears as we made our way back to the car. We picked up the kids afterward and decided to celebrate with Bill and his family at McDonald's. It was a small moment of joy, but it felt well-deserved. Later that night, my father called me. Since the restraining order doesn't extend to him, he's still able to contact me. Jane and the kids were already asleep, so I decided to answer, thinking it might be a chance for him to finally make things right. I didn't expect a sudden change of heart or an apology, but I figured I'd give him one last chance. He started with some awkward small talk, but I cut him off and told him to get to the point. He asked me if the protection order was truly necessary. My answer was simple and firm: yes. Stepmom is never coming near Jane or my children again, and I'm glad the court has formalized that. He tried to defend her, offering every excuse imaginable. She only hit him once, he said. That's one time too many, I replied. The kids need their grandma, he argued. She's not their grandma, my mom is. Jane is my wife, and you need to respect her, I shot back. I reminded him of what she'd done, how she disrespected my family in my own home, how she physically harmed Luke. I told him, point blank, that I owed her nothing, not my respect, not my forgiveness, and certainly not a place in our lives. That's when he went on a rant about family, calling my stepmom a godsend, and listing all the things she'd supposedly done for me and my sister since entering our lives. His words were easy to counter. I calmly listed every instance of her lying, overstepping boundaries, or acting completely unhinged, both in my adult life and when I was younger. I brought up her attempts to hijack nearly every major milestone in our lives, our wedding plans, our son's birth, Jane's baby shower, even my sister's college graduation. I talked about her obsession with creating the perfect family image and her vile attitude toward Luke. I also mentioned her habit of snooping through our belongings when we were kids, something that continued until my sister moved out just 3 months ago. One recent example stood out. We're pretty sure she found out about Jane's wedding dress appointments by going through my sister's planner when she wasn't home. Some of these memories are long and painful to explain, but reliving them solidified my feelings. Stepmom means nothing to me. When my dad tried his usual excuse, that she behaves this way because she doesn't feel included, I shut him down immediately. You had the opportunity to protect your grandchildren, I said, but instead, you chose to defend your monster of a wife. That's enough for me to want nothing to do with you. Then I hung up without saying goodbye. Not long after, my sister called to tell me he'd reached out to her as well. She informed him that she was officially going no contact with him too. It hurts to accept, but I think both of us are finally coming to terms with the fact that our dad isn't going to change. He's made his priorities clear, and unfortunately, his children and grandchildren aren't among them. Update 3: Stepmom tried to hijack our baby shower. In my last post, I mentioned that I might share some of the stories that came to mind during my argument with my dad. There are plenty worth telling, but I'll start with one of my sister's personal favorites. All names are still fake. Jane found out she was pregnant in June 2021, and we announced the news to our immediate families in August. Unsurprisingly, my stepmom wasn't particularly thrilled. In fact, her reaction to our pregnancy announcement was to look Jane dead in the eye and ask, "Are you sure it's his?" Even my dad couldn't defend her for that one. He actually scolded her for once, but she barely acknowledged it. From then on, she acted like she couldn't care less about our baby. Instead, all her attention was focused on my stepbrother, who was also engaged and planning to give her a beautiful grandbaby soon. I didn't mind her lack of interest. If anything, it was a relief. We didn't want her involved, and thankfully, we didn't even have to say anything to make that clear. Planning the baby shower, however, turned out to be a challenge. Jane and I both had demanding work schedules that stretched into the holidays, and I wanted to be involved in the planning process. With our due date set for February 2022, we decided that early January would be the perfect time for the shower. To keep things manageable, we enlisted 2 planners, my sister Laura, I just realized I hadn't named her before, and Jane's best friend, Nina. Jane and I are laid-back people, and we didn't want anything over the top. The plan was to keep the shower small and affordable since we were saving for both the baby and the wedding. It would be co-ed, held indoors, because January, and have a guest list of 25 people, plus about a dozen kids. We came up with the idea of a pizza party for the baby shower. Ever since I moved in, Jane, Luke, and I, along with my brother-in-law, who's like a surrogate son, have had weekly homemade pizza nights. It's one of our favorite traditions, so we thought it would be fun to incorporate that into the shower. Nina found an event venue with a pizza oven, and Laura figured out clever ways to combine classic baby shower elements with the pizza theme. The plans were fantastic: make your own pizzas, non-alcoholic drinks, and plain baby bodysuits for guests to decorate. Nina and Laura blended pizza-themed decor with baby shower accents, even finding pizza-shaped sweets. It might sound chaotic, but somehow, they pulled it off, and we loved it. By mid-November, most of the planning was done. Then, later that month, my stepbrother's fiancée left him for her ex. They'd been together for 4 years, and the breakup was sudden and devastating for him. Naturally, my stepmom realized that the grandbaby she'd been fantasizing about was no longer on the horizon. With no milestones of her son's to obsess over, she turned her attention to ours. In no time, stepmom went from being a disinterested relative to an overly enthusiastic grandma-to-be. She started making tacky Facebook posts, wore those promoted Nana shirts, and generally went all in. At first, Jane and I were too busy with work and preparing for the holidays to pay her antics much attention. But it didn't take long for her to start pestering us about planning both a baby shower and a gender reveal party. We flat out refused to have a gender reveal party. No offense to anyone who enjoys them, but they're just not our thing. Besides, we'd already decided to wait until the baby was born to find out the sex. That didn't stop stepmom from trying to pressure us. She even suggested that we find out and tell her as a Christmas gift. We didn't, of course. As for the baby shower, we had no intention of letting her plan it either. When we told her no, she complained to my dad, who then pressured Laura into letting stepmom help out. Since Laura was still living with them at the time, she didn't have much of a choice. Laura called Nina, and the three of them met for coffee to discuss the plans. Although I wasn't there, Laura later told me what happened. Before they even had a chance to share their ideas, stepmom pulled out a ridiculously thick binder labeled "Oh Baby." It had colorful tabs, fabric swatches sticking out of the sides, and an entire section dedicated to her vision for the shower. Laura sent me pictures, and let's just say, wow. To be fair, stepmom's ideas looked like they'd photograph well for Instagram. But they were completely impractical, over the top, and obviously expensive. She envisioned balloons, oversized teddy bears, giant alphabet blocks, and cringe-worthy signs everywhere. The setup was more about aesthetics than comfort, with hard, uncomfortable chairs and food ideas that didn't even look edible. Most of the menu involved soft cheeses, which Jane couldn't eat while pregnant. The color scheme was exclusively 3 shades of pink with gold accents. We wouldn't have minded a pink-themed shower, but this was excessive. Honestly, her ideas looked like Barbie had thrown up all over Hello Kitty's birthday party. And when Nina reminded her that we didn't know the baby's sex yet, stepmom confidently declared that she just knew it was a girl. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Her vision included an all-female, child-free party with fancy caterers and alcohol. She even made a guest list featuring some of her closest friends, none of whom Jane or I knew. Neither of our moms were on the list, and the party games she planned didn't interest anyone. The only thing everyone could agree on was holding the party indoors. After she finished presenting her vision, Laura and Nina finally got a chance to explain the pizza party theme. They were polite but firm, saying they could incorporate a few of her ideas if possible, but most of the plans had already been finalized. With the shower just a month away, everything had been approved by Jane and me. Stepmom protested, of course, but Laura shut her down. She told her it was generous of them to even consider adding any of her suggestions this late in the game. Stepmom then called me, hoping I'd force them to change their plans. I repeated what Laura and Nina had said, adding that my dad wasn't invited to the shower, so he had no say in anything either. Thankfully, the holidays came and went, and the subject was dropped. Stepmom seemed to accept the pizza party idea. Nina even managed to incorporate some of the pink decor she wanted, pairing it with matching blue elements and adding one of those oversized teddy bears. Fast forward to a week before the shower. Jane was almost 8 months pregnant, and everything was ready to go. The shower was scheduled for 7 p.m., all the guests had RSVP'd, and decorations had been bought. Stepmom offered to arrive at the venue early to help set up, and Laura agreed, mostly to avoid hearing her complain about being left out. The venue even allowed them to drop off decorations ahead of time. Jane and I planned to arrive at 6 p.m. to check on everything. But 2 days before the shower, Nina got a call from the venue. Stepmom had stopped by to drop off some large, heavy boxes, describing them as a little surprise for us. The venue staff called to inform us that stepmom had told them she planned to arrive at 3:30 p.m. to begin setting up. They wanted to reiterate that the venue was only available to us starting at 4 p.m., as per the booking. Apparently, stepmom wasn't thrilled about this and had nearly thrown a tantrum. Nina still had all the decor at her place, so Laura decided to call and confirm that nothing had been left with stepmom. Thankfully, my sister, who is both clever and experienced in dealing with our stepmom, drove to the venue the next day to check on the boxes stepmom had dropped off. When Laura opened them, she wasn't exactly surprised by their contents, but she was still shocked by the audacity. Every single box was packed with pink, frilly decorations, exact replicas of the items stepmom had shown her and Nina earlier. There were balloons, signs, placemats, and more. Laura quickly realized that stepmom's plan was to show up early and transform the event into her own Barbie Dreamhouse version of the baby shower, forcing everyone to celebrate her vision instead of ours. Laura immediately called Nina, and the two brainstormed a solution. Since neither of them could arrive at the venue before 4 p.m., it seemed almost inevitable that stepmom would succeed. The obvious answer was to throw all the pink decor away, but Laura had a better idea. That evening, Laura and Nina called me and Jane with their plan. Want to destroy a party in 2 hours? Laura returned home and invited stepmom to go to the salon with her, pretending to have coupons for a special deal. Stepmom happily agreed, and they scheduled the outing for right after she finished setting up the shower at 4 p.m. The next day, stepmom arrived at the venue and had everything set up by 5 p.m. I'll admit, the woman works fast. Once she finished, she left to meet Laura at the salon. As soon as they were together, Laura texted Nina that the coast was clear. At that point, Jane, Nina, and I went to the venue. Sure enough, stepmom had decorated the entire place with her pink monstrosity. To make a long story short, I won't go into detail, but let's just say it was so overwhelmingly pink that it almost made Jane nauseous. For the next 2 hours, Laura kept stepmom distracted at the salon while the three of us dismantled every single piece of her decor and replaced it with our pizza party setup. We arranged the tables, set up the activities, and packed all her pink items neatly back into her boxes. Honestly, it ended up being a lot of fun. We finished just minutes before the shower started, and a few guests had already arrived before stepmom got back. When stepmom walked in and saw the transformed venue, her jaw dropped. She was visibly trying to process what had happened to her decorations. Laura, ever the MVP, walked up to her, leaned in, and whispered, "Nice try," before heading off to help Luke decorate a baby bodysuit. The baby shower turned out exactly as we'd hoped. Our friends showed up, everyone had a great time, and there was plenty of pizza for everyone. I didn't care that stepmom spent the entire evening sulking in the corner. Nina did catch her trying to stick little pink bows onto the cupcakes, but she quickly shut that down. Full credit goes to Laura and Nina for saving the day. After that, stepmom's enthusiasm about being a grandma completely fizzled out. She stopped wearing her Nana shirts, didn't visit us in the hospital when our son was born, and refused to even acknowledge he was a boy until she met him weeks later. Honestly, I couldn't be more grateful that my son will never truly know her. Edit: the baby shower started at 7 p.m. because it was the only time that worked for everyone, including the venue, since it was booked earlier in the day. While the shower wasn't strictly child-free, most of the kids who attended were at least 9 years old. Luke was the only little one there, and most parents left early anyway. Update 4, Stepmonster is gone for good. After being engaged for over 2 years, Jane and I finally got married last Saturday. We're still adjusting to calling each other husband and wife, but we'll get there. The wedding was amazing. The kids had a blast, our extended families got to meet for the first time, and we danced so much that I could barely stand the next day. Luke took his role as ring bearer very seriously, holding our son's hand as they walked down the aisle together. There were only a couple of hiccups, like my aunt getting absolutely trashed, but overall, it was perfect. Everything went according to plan at the wedding, and I'm so grateful for that. It's been 4 months since we got the restraining order against my stepmom, and life has been mostly quiet, which is exactly how I'd like it to stay. While I never seriously worried about stepmom showing up at the wedding, especially with the restraining order in place, we made it clear that if she did, we'd call the cops immediately. My friend still encouraged me to take extra safety measures, which I did. Stepmom didn't show up, of course, but I have no regrets about spending money on security. Peace of mind is priceless. Since then, my stepbrother and I have had minimal contact. We wished each other happy birthdays, and he texted Jane on hers back in June. That's about it. The door is still open for him if he wants to apologize, but for now, things are quiet on that front. As for my dad, he's given up trying to contact me. We haven't spoken since April. He's still attempting to talk to my sister for some reason, though she's ignoring him as well. A few days after she went no contact with him, they had a huge fight over the phone about stepmom's treatment of us over the years. Things got heated, insults were thrown, sensitive topics were dredged up, and my dad sided with stepmom on almost everything. My sister called me in tears after that conversation. I wanted to call him and yell at him myself, but she begged me not to. She's doing better now. While she hasn't blocked him, she refuses to answer his calls or texts. In the months since, he's only sent her 3 messages, a weak apology, a half-hearted birthday greeting for me in May, and a long rant after neither of us wished him a happy Father's Day. In his words, "Despite our differences, I'm still your father." And he's not wrong, I do love him and always will. But I can't have him in my life anymore. That door isn't locked, but it's firmly shut. He knows what he needs to do if he wants to mend things, though I doubt he'll ever take those steps. This approach is actually Jane's suggestion. She's more optimistic than I am about the possibility of him changing, though she hasn't forgiven him or stepmom either. Jane is fiercely protective of Luke, so this entire ordeal shook her deeply. I was afraid she might blame me for what happened, but when I brought it up, she just called me a dumbass for even thinking that. Therapy has been a huge help for me over the past few months. It's made me realize that stepmom's behavior toward me growing up was far worse than I ever fully acknowledged. Being able to talk about it and process everything has been incredibly freeing. Right now, I couldn't be happier. I'm married to the most amazing woman, I have the family I've always dreamed of, and life feels better than I ever expected. None of us are perfect, but I wouldn't trade this messy, beautiful life for anything. Final update, stepmom and stepbrother. I didn't expect to write another update, but here we are. A lot of people have messaged me about my stepbrother, so I wanted to share what's happened since we last spoke. Back in August, my stepbrother reached out after a fight with stepmom. Apparently, the restraining order came up during their argument, and she'd lied to him about the details. She accused Luke of bullying our baby, badmouthed Jane, and more. This time, though, my stepbrother pushed back and forced her to tell the truth. That conversation prompted him to start re-evaluating his relationship with his mom. He talked to his therapist, his friends, and others about how she'd raised him and her recent behavior. Eventually, he came to terms with the fact that I hadn't been exaggerating about what she did to Luke. He told me he'd wanted to reach out back in June but didn't want to distract Jane and me during the wedding. When we finally met for coffee, he apologized and admitted he'd been wrong to defend stepmom. Over the past 4 months, we've been rebuilding our relationship. We've met for coffee and lunch to talk through everything, including stepmom's actions and the ways she affected both of our lives. In October, Jane started joining us for these meetups, and 2 weeks ago, the kids saw my stepbrother for the first time in years. Things were awkward at first, but we've worked through it. He's also been making amends with my sister. In early November, he officially cut contact with stepmom. As for us, Jane and the kids are doing wonderfully. Luke turned 5 in September, and our baby will be 2 in February. We're spending the holidays with Jane's family in Brazil, while my stepbrother is staying with his girlfriend. Things are finally good again. That's all for now. If anything major happens, I'll let you all know. Happy holidays, and best wishes to everyone who supported us throughout this journey.